Amphibia is one of two isekai Disney shows to air simultaneously, each released 6 months apart, Amphibia being released first on June 17th, 2019. Disney XD often has shows that become super popular, or that just flop. Amphibia, thankfully, is one of the shows that became super popular, and for good reason. It's really good. It's funny, dramatic, action-packed, irreverent, and yet still manages a healthy earnestness and has plenty of lessons that the younger among us may benefit from. Recently, the show ended, and to celebrate the instant classic, we're gonna look at it in chronological order from start to finish. Sit back and grab a delicious California avocado, because we're gonna be going on a journey that spans thousands of years and multiple dimensions. And obviously, big and immediate spoilers following this sentence, so there's your warning. 10,000 BC. The Guardian of the Multiverse, in an attempt to test the people and see what they would do with great power, creates the Calamity Gems and sends them out into the universe. At some point in time thereafter, they appear in Amphibia, where they're harnessed through the use of a music box, becoming the central artifact of the series from that point on. Over the next 11,000 years to 1000 AD, the Calamity Box falls into the hands of the Newts, where King Aldrich and his ancestors proceed to use it to open portals and conquer other worlds using its power. This was when otherworldly creatures were brought in, such as the Mossmen and the Shadowfish. Through study of these creatures and their cultures, Newtopian technology increased to a degree that they could make incredible machines, among which was a supercomputer called the Core that allowed them to transfer their consciousnesses into it and create a hive mind consisting of the smartest minds in Amphibia, including King Aldrich at a later date. Prince Andreas, just prior to a new campaign, allowed his friends Beryl the Brave, a toad, and Leaf, a frog, to see the Calamity Box. At this point, Leaf touched the gems and received a vision of the future, which caused her great distress. She tried to meet with King Aldrich to dissuade him from continuing with these invasions, but upon failing, she fled with the Calamity Box. Prince Andreas and Beryl chased her, with the latter catching her but letting her escape after she told Beryl about the future. With Leaf's escape, Beryl is expelled from Newtopia, where he would guard the outskirt villages, which he did with valor until his death at the hands of a narwhal worm. Leaf goes to Mother Olm for help and ultimately decides to send the Calamity Box to a new world, which happens to be the human world. She would go on to found Wartwood, where she would change her name to Lily Planter to further hide from the Newts. She would marry a farmer and go on to become the matriarch of the Planter family. At some point in time, the moon is converted by the Newts to house the Core and their experiments. 1800 AD. Pollyanna Planter is born. She was a turnip farmer, but also a great warrior and weaponsmith. In the 1850s, however, she passes away. 1951 AD. Hopadiah Planter is born. In his early years, Hop Pop was a wagon driver, or maybe he wasn't, it depends on if you count his ghost story about picking up the Grim Reaper as true. He uses it as an excuse to explain his loss of hair. He was a farmer from that point on, and would go on to have children of his own. 2006. Anne Boone Choi, Marcy Wu, and Sasha Waybright are born in Los Angeles, and 3 years later, in 2009, Sprig Planter is born in Wartwood. 2010. Anne, Marcy, and Sasha meet on the playground. Anne also leaves California for a time where she wants some spicy food, but her mother instead gives her baby carrots, which emotionally scars Anne. Anne later finds a cat on the street, which she names Domino. In 2014, Polly Planter is born, where she's given a name inspired by her ancestor, Pollyanna Planter. Polly would go on to inherit many of her ancestors' traits, including her tough nature. Sometime after Polly's birth, herons attack Wartwood, and Sprig and Polly lose their parents. Hopadiah, who had been away on a business trip, returns to save his family, only to have nothing left of them save for his grandson and granddaughter. 2018 and Sprig of 2019. Okay, here we go. Anne's parents are preparing for her 13th birthday, but she never shows up. Anne, Marcy, and Sasha would hear about the Calamity Box and pressure Anne into stealing it. Marcy did this with intent, hoping that it would really create a portal so she could stay with her friends, whom she didn't want to leave because she knew she would have to move out of state due to her father getting a new job. Well, her wishes are fulfilled, and the trio are transported to Amphibia. In Amphibia, Anne lives in a cave for a little while, Sasha is captured by Captain Grime and is imprisoned in Toad Tower, and Marcy ends up in Newtopia, where she meets King Andreas and gains his trust. Due to her intelligent nature, she quickly becomes the head ranger of the Newtopia Night Guard. Anne is spotted by One-Eyed Wally in the forest and informs Wartwood's citizens, who form a mob to hunt this strange monster. But first, she meets Sprig, who wishes to prove that he's responsible by doing the most irresponsible thing there is. However, he befriends Anne and tries to help her escape. It's then that the townspeople are attacked by praying mantises, but Anne saves them and is begrudgingly tolerated by the town, where she's taken in by the Planters, becoming her surrogate family while she's in Amphibia. Best Fronds. Anne is locked away in the planter's home to keep her out of the public eye. Anne, however, wants to go exploring and convinces Sprig to get the key so they can leave. They go out to a lake where they ignore the no swimming sign and end up being attacked by a massive snake. Once defeating it, Anne officially acknowledges Sprig as her friend. Meanwhile, Sasha is being interrogated in Toad Tower by Captain Grime. Hopluck. Wartwood is having its annual potluck, and to avoid the shame cage, Anne decides to help the planters make a pizza. To do so, however, they need certain ingredients for it. Most of the ingredients are easily gathered. Sprig may or may not have been sold into marrying Maddie. But the tomatoes they need for the sauce are attached to a giant Monster-mator plant which eats them, causing them to lose all of their ingredients. To escape, they eat the delicious tomato plant monster and harvest its tomatoes to use for a new dish. Despite impressing the town with their dish, they still lose because while it's great for the planters, it's still pretty bad. The Domino Effect. Anne and Sprig find an adorable caterpillar that reminds Anne of her house cat Domino. They take it back with them to the planter home and keep it hidden due to Hop Pop's aversion to house pets after Sprig and Polly failed to properly take responsibility for a tarantula named Charlie Bigbottom. It becomes a hassle to take care of, but Anne manages to keep it hidden. Until she doesn't. Eventually, Domino 2 wraps itself into a cocoon and Hop Pop finds it. He identifies it as a coastal Killapillar which emerges from its cocoon and attacks the family. Anne leads it out with a cat toy and frees it. Sprig vs. Hop Pop. Sprig is upset when he finds out that Hop Pop never takes anyone's suggestions on the farm, so he challenges Hop Pop to a wrestling match for ownership of the farm. Surprisingly, Sprig flukes his way into a victory and Hop Pop leaves the farm in shame. Sprig starts taking and making use of all suggestions, but when the farm starts to fall apart, they recommend giving Hop Pop ownership back, but Sprig has gone mad with power. Anne and Polly find Hop Pop, who is living in the cemetery amongst the beetles, especially this little guy, Jeremy, and has learned humility. They convince him to come back, where he challenges Sprig for ownership once again. He promises to take people's suggestions into consideration instead of outright burning them, and Sprig lets himself be defeated, having seen the error of his ways. Later, we see Hop Pop still burning suggestions, though he gives them consideration first and actually finds one he thinks could work. Girl time. Anne feels Polly is acting too boyish and attempts to take her on a girl's day out, using Hop Pop's wallet to pay for it. Turns out his wallet is full of IOUs. During this time, Anne insults Polly, who isn't having any fun on the day out. As it turns out, Hop Pop is not in fact good for the IOUs, and so the planters are arrested. Their only hope is to win a spitting contest, which Polly happens to be a prodigy at. However, she isn't living up to her potential due to feeling ashamed of herself due to Anne's insults. Anne apologizes to her and tells Polly to not feel any shame for being herself, and Polly breaks the record and gets the gold trophy, which they then have melted down to pay for their debt. What's left of the trophy is made into a teeny tiny trophy depicting Polly that's then put on display in the town square. Anne vs. Wild. The planters decide to go camping. Anne wants to hang out with them more despite hating camping. She claims she's a hardcore camper, and Soggy Joe decides to take them to a dangerous part of the woods where they're attacked by mudmen. Anne uses a bath bomb to reveal that the mudmen are actually cannibal frogs who then flee. Anne admits that she knows nothing about camping and just wanted to spend time with the family. She then explains how she got there and shows them the box. Hop Pop later learns that the box is known as the Calamity Box and it was thought to be destroyed. Family Shrub. Putting together a family shrub, nobody in the planter family household seems to be enjoying it except Hop Pop as usual. Anne is instead playing Tetris since she doesn't have any familial connection to the planters. Hop Pop tells her she doesn't need to be a planter to be part of their family. Hop Pop runs out of glue and goes to the store to get more. While away, the kids discover a secret passageway under the planter home and discover more about their family, such as Pollyanna Planter, whom Polly never knew was a warrior. Anne specifically feels a connection with Emma Planter, who was actually a newt that was adopted into the family like Anne was. Hop Pop returns, half glued to Loggle, who then heads into the passage when he hears about it. Toad Tax. Disappointed that nobody in Wartwood respects her, Anne joins the soldier of Toad Tower who have come to collect Wartwood's taxes, which the Toads claim they've been late paying. Sprig discovers why the money never reached the Toads. Anne helps them collect the tax money and is slightly upset with the brute nature they use to achieve their goals. Eventually, she learns that the planters are next on their list, and when they show up to take the money, she tells them that they're wrong and that she knows Hop Pop paid his taxes because she was there when it happened. As Anne realizes her mistake, they all fight, and it's then that Sprig points out that Mayor Toadstool has been hiding the tax money for himself instead of giving it to the Toads. And unlike in real life, Mayor Toadstool sees the consequences for his embezzlement. With the Toads collecting the stolen money, the townsfolk getting their stolen items back, the mayor getting pelted with rotten fruit, and Anne is declared the official protector of Wartwood, gaining the town's trust. Prison Break. Sasha is still a prisoner at Toad Tower, but her charm gets the soldiers to like her, which upsets Captain Grime. When one of the soldiers, Percy, accidentally leads a group of herons to attack Toad Tower, Sasha uses this as an opportunity to escape. However, she decides to help the Toads and tells Grime that he needs to be nicer if he wishes to rally his troops. She teaches him how to be a better leader and they repel the herons. Grime decides to make Sasha a lieutenant in his army in exchange for helping her find Anne and Marcy. Hop Popular. Hop Pop is sad that he lost his family stand in a previous episode and decides to run for mayor against Toadstool. The rest of the planters try to help him win, hoping he doesn't get depressed again about the stand. Amazingly, Hop Pop's popularity among the citizens of Wartwood grows astronomically, and when the tests for mayorhood comes, he also fares far better than Toadstool. However, before the final test, which is a boxing match for some reason, Toadstool tries to bribe Hoppadiah into taking a dive in exchange for getting his stand back, but Hop Pop refuses and manages to beat Toadstool in the boxing match. However, despite everyone in Wartwood voting for Hoppadiah, the rest of the valley voted for Toadstool, meaning Toadstool remains mayor since Hop Pop didn't know he had to campaign elsewhere. Trip to the archives. Anne and the planters decide to go to the archives to learn more about how to get Anne back home. Sprig is bored and wants an adventure. He breaks a key piece of the locking mechanism to the archives and instead gets them locked in. They try to escape through various ways, but Sprig manages to find his way out via the bathroom. Anne rebukes him by telling him that even if it's boring, she needs to find the answers for how to get home, and Sprig apologizes. Bazaar. Anne learns of a night market where someone might know about the Calamity Box and how to get home. Hop Pop forbids them from going though, and still does of course, and right on the cusp of getting some answers, her backpack is stolen, the box included. To get it back, they need to win a Mario Kart style race against the Wrecker, however they lose and the Bazaar disappears. Surprisingly though, Hop Pop turned out to be the Wrecker all along and was attempting to teach them a lesson. They agree to listen to him better, but during the night, Hop Pop secretly buries the music box in the backyard, afraid of the harm it could bring. Anne of the Year. Anne discovers that she's won the Frog of the Year award and decides to throw an epic party for the citizens of Wartwood. She also hopes Sprig will ask his crush Ivy Sundew out on a date. The party ensues, but it crashes and burns worse than anyone could have expected due to Anne's micromanagement. Hop Pop informs her that she wasn't voted Frog of the Year because she's flawless, but because she was growing as a person. Sprig decides to ask Ivy out, but Ivy beats him to it. Anne is then informed that someone is looking for her at the town entrance. Anne goes out and discovers Sasha. Mid through late 2019. Reunion. Immediately after Anne of the Year, the Toads come and round up the frogs for a banquet they're throwing at Toad Tower. However, this is discovered to be nothing but a ruse to kill Hop Pop, who has become a bit of a revolutionary icon to the frogs, causing them to step out of line and show resistance to the Toads' policing. Anne tries to free the frogs, but a climactic sword fight between Anne and Sasha ensues with Anne winning. As the tower crumbles due to One-Eyed Wally's tampering, Sasha almost falls to her death. Anne's grip on Sasha slips, but she's caught by Grime from her death and they recede into the forest. Handy Anne. The planters are preparing for a trip to Newtopia. They ask Chuck, who grows tulips, to house sit for them. Anne, however, thinks that Chuck is incompetent and buys a potion to fortify the house, but instead creates a giant plant monster that rips the place apart. Anne defeats it, but the home is destroyed. Hop Pop, however, reveals that they hired Chuck because on top of growing tulips, he's a master home builder. Chuck proceeds to rebuild the home in seconds as the planters make their way to Newtopia. Hop Pop tells Anne that he's left the music box with one of his contacts for safekeeping and research, though it's still buried underground. Toadcatcher. After having been defeated by Anne, Sasha trains for the day that she'll face Anne again. By her side is a lazy Grime and his last remaining soldiers, Percy and Braddock. They accidentally reveal Grime's location to a Newt soldier named General Unan, who has a tick of always introducing herself in an extravagant way. Sorry, that should be General Unan, Scourge of the Sand Wars, defeater of Ragnar the Wretched, the youngest Newt ever to achieve the rank of general in the great Newtopian army. She tracks Grime down and proceeds to fight against Sasha and Grime together. Sasha uses Unan's tick as a means of escape, and Grime is reinvigorated and begins to plot the capture of Newtopia. Marcy at the gates, scavenger hunt, and the planters check in. The planters arrive at the gates of Newtopia and find it closed off due to giant ants. They're met by a hooded warrior who Anne identifies as her friend Marcy. After a brief moment of joy, they decide to venture into the Barbara ant hill where they hope to drive them and their queen off with a foul-smelling plant. Anne reveals that Marcy is very clumsy and Anne overprotects her, which causes slight contention between the two. They eventually succeed and are able to enter Newtopia. There, Marcy receives a puzzlegram from the Newt King, which tells her to bring him the planters. Anne and the planters are brought before King Andreas, a giant lizard who possesses a jovial disposition and voiced by the inimitable Keith David. He tells them the secret to the music box. The 3 gems populating it when charged can create a portal, but they can only be charged at 3 different temples. He also gives them a gold credit card with virtually unlimited funds and puts them up in an incredibly luxurious hotel. Sprig, being Sprig, loses the credit card when he's playing around against Hop Pop's command, but he manages to retrieve the card while befriending a Kristen Schaal-voiced bellhop and sneaks back into his hotel room tired from the ordeal, only to have to wake up the moment he shuts his eyes. A day at the aquarium. After spending much time in Newtopia and gathering all the info they need, the planters decide to part ways with Anne and go home after one final day with her. As they go to the aquarium for fun, they're reminded of all the fun things they've done with Anne, causing them to cry at the drop of a hat. Sprig gets in trouble when he upsets a stingray with his wailing, but it all worked out. The day comes and they say goodbye to Anne. However, Marcy sees how upset they are, and she says that Anne can join the planters on the trip back, and Marcy will just rendezvous with Anne later. Anne then rushes to rejoin the planters and returns home with them as Marcy receives a proposition from Andreas. Return to Wartwood. The planters return home, at which Chuck grew many tulips, only for Hop Pop to realize that he forgot the list of things he promised the citizens of Wartwood he would bring back. Anne tells him that he needs to take responsibility, but instead the planters summon a Chickalisk to attack the town to make it look like the gifts were destroyed in the attack. However, the townsfolk fight back, which provokes the Chickalisk, causing it to attack the people in earnest. Anne convinces Hop Pop to come clean, and they do. Sprig then takes Ivy out on a date. After the rain. Getting a message from Marcy, the planters get ready for their mission. However, when Hop Pop goes to unearth the music box, it isn't there. Anne, discovering this, obviously feels betrayed and runs away. Hop Pop chases after her. Meanwhile, Sprig and Polly discover that the box has been taken by beetles and is at the center of a Love-Nado dance. They try to save it but get in trouble themselves. Hop Pop and Anne set aside their differences and save them and the box. Anne goes to leave, but Hop Pop explains why he lied to her about the box, citing the loss of Sprig and Polly's parents. Anne forgives him, but some tension still remains. The First Temple. Marcy and the planters look for the first temple where they'll charge the music box's green gem. It turns out it's an intelligence-based trial, and Marcy seems to have no issue solving the problems. Anne's resentment towards Hop Pop also comes to a head. In the end, she tells him that she doesn't know when or if things will ever get back to normal. Hop Pop accepts this and promises to give her as much time as she needs. Through this, Marcy continues to blast through the challenges and the green gem finishes charging. The Second Temple and Barrel's Hammer. The planters and Marcy look for the Second Temple. In the snowy tundra, they're met by Valeriana, who they had met in the Bazaar, and she reveals that she is the guardian of the temple. Along the way, Anne is forced to sacrifice her own comforts and safety for others and eventually loses her patience. Valeriana claims that Anne has always acted selfish and has done many bad things, but when Anne ends up saving Valeriana herself, she reveals her true nature of being kind and wise, and she tells Anne that she has displayed her courage and they charge the blue gem. To a point. But don't completely finish because Anne hears the planters scream, thinking they're in danger, but she rushes back to find that they were just watching a cute cat video. Meanwhile, Sasha, Grime, Percy, and Braddock arrive at the Toad Summit to pitch their idea of taking over Newtopia to the others. They like the idea, specifically the presentation, however, they don't like the idea of Grime leading considering what happened at Toad Tower. However, Sasha takes the challenge to find the unobtainable Barrel's Hammer as a show of strength. As they go to find it, Percy and Braddock are scared, but Sasha tells them it'll be fine. She tells them to make a kawaii face if it ever becomes too much and they'll stop. However, upon finding a giant worm, Percy and Braddock start kawaiiing like mad, but Sasha ignores them, stating that they're so close and can't stop now. They manage to retrieve the hammer, but in gaining the weapon and the Toad's support, Sasha loses Percy and Braddock's. Having reached their limit, the two leave Sasha. The Third Temple. Marcy and the planters make their way to the Third Temple, which is located within a large volcano. Inside of it, they find Sasha and Grime, who claim to be good guys now, but Anne is skeptical. When the final trial of power is taken, they must defeat a giant stone monster. With Sasha's help, they manage to defeat it and recharge the red stone. Grime reminds Sasha of their true plan, but Sasha begins to feel conflicted. In any case, the Triforces of Wisdom, Courage, and now Power have all finally been charged. Battle of the Bands. Sasha and Grime are crashing with Marcy, Anne, and the planters in Wartwood while maintaining their ruse. To put the frogs at ease, they host a battle of the bands where the girls proceed to practice together. However, unable to agree on which song to do, Sasha splits from the group to compete by herself. She teams up with the mayor's assistant, Toadie, who shows her how much it sucks to have nothing but yes men around her. She returns and does the new song with Anne and Marcy, which blows the citizens away. However, they're completely outdone by Grime, who performs a 3-hour harp solo and takes the gold. They all prepare to return to Newtopia, where they'll return to Earth. Or so they think. True colors. Okay, here we go. The girls, the planters, and Grime arrive in Newtopia, where they meet with King Andrias. However, Sasha and Grime make their move to attempt to take over Newtopia. They partially succeed and take Andrias hostage. While reveling in their victory, they discover Andrias has some dark plans of his own. When an unwitting Anne leads a counterattack to stop Sasha and Grime, freeing Andrias, Andrias uses the box to awaken the dormant frog bots all across Amphibia and cause his castle to rise into the sky as a flying fortress. He then reveals that Marcy knew, and through teary eyes, she admits it, spilling her true motive to Anne and Sasha, begging them to forgive her. A battle breaks out in which Polly's legs sprout and Sprig is seemingly killed. He's rescued by Marcy, but as Anne believes Sprig to be dead, she achieves her calamity powers Gohan style, and oh my god, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen! Her powers eventually fade, however, and in the last moment, she's pushed into the human world along with the planters by Marcy, who then gets stabbed straight through the chest by Andrias. The portal closes, and Anne and the planters are now on Earth. The new normal. Anne and the planters arrive in Los Angeles, where she returns home. Mr. and Mrs. Boonshoy are shocked and relieved to see their daughter again, who's been missing, presumed dead for like 5 months. She tries to introduce the planters, but it naturally confuses her parents. She recounts everything for them, much like I'm doing for you here right now, except she leaves out all of the good parts to keep them from worrying. Meanwhile, a cloak bot was sent to Earth to attack Anne and the planters. However, Anne awakens to her Super Saiyan Blue form and fights back, driving the bot off, finding a safe spot to repair itself. Turning point. Back in Amphibia, Sasha and Grime have escaped Newtopia and are seeking refuge in Wartwood, where they're banking off of Anne's clout to gain the sympathy they need to hide. After finding Anne's journal and discovering the fighting spirit of the townsfolk, she decides to change for the better and begins to form a resistance against the oppression of King Andrias alongside the citizens of Wartwood. Fight at the museum. To learn more about the multiverse, Anne and the planters, in disguise of course, head to a museum in hopes of finding answers. They find Dr. Jan, who's the curator. She offers to talk to them about it, but Anne is sleep-deprived and paranoid, and so she turns her down. She instead plans to steal an artifact depicting amphibians at night. Like, people from Amphibia, not just like regular frogs. Anyway, during the heist, Anne and them are attacked by the Cloakbot. Dr. Jan and the guards show up and spot the Cloakbot, causing it to flee. Dr. Jan uses her position of authority to keep the planters hidden from the other guards and tells Anne to get some sleep. The next day, she finds a Gravity Falls-style secret message on the jar using a blacklight. Temple frogs. Anne is told to meet Dr. Jan, but she's told by her parents that she needs to stay for at least 1 hour at the Thai temple to see everyone in the community. The planters enjoy their time there, but Anne desperately tries to sneak out and is caught by her mother. Suddenly, drones attack the temple, and the citizens fight back to protect Anne and the planters, who lose their disguises in the shuffle. Dr. Jan then shows up and gives them the message about the mother of Olms, Anne-sterminator. Anne decides that she needs to tell her parents about Andrias and the danger that they're in. Meanwhile, the Cloakbot's internal bomb is activated by Andrias, who sets it to 1 hour and tells it to find Anne and kill her. It attacks them, and the planters and the Boonshoys escape, but get cornered in the junkyard where Anne reawakens her calamity powers to beat the Cloakbot before it can explode, and protects her family. She then passes out, but regains consciousness while she explains everything to her parents. Meanwhile, the FBI and RuPaul are watching footage of her and the planters. Spooky. Mr. X. Anne takes the planters to see a movie, but RuPaul, whose name is Mr. X, show up to investigate/capture them. The theater ends up surrounded by the FBI, but the planters and Anne manage to escape with the Boonshoys' help, subsequently making Mr. X look crazy. Olivia and Yunnan. Lady Olivia of Newtopia and General Yunnan, Scourge of the Sand Wars, defeater of Ragnar the Wretched, decide to rescue Marcy, who's in stasis, recovering from her stabbing. They attempt to escape, but are surrounded by an illusion that takes advantage of their greatest psychological weaknesses. They power through, but are then confronted by Andrias, who explains his plan to use Marcy by making her host to the core. In the form of a helmet, the supercomputer takes over Marcy's body. If you give a frog a cookie. Dr. Jan tells Anne about a mad scientist named Dr. Frakes who studies different universes. Dr. Jan warns Anne to be careful about trusting Dr. Frakes, as she exists sorta outside the scientific community. But the homesick planters guilt-trip Anne into checking it out immediately, where they find that Dr. Frakes has made a portal. However, they can't find Amphibia through it. Upon learning the planters' identities, Dr. Frakes captures them, but with the help of Terry, Dr. Frakes' assistant, Anne manages to rescue them. Having been fired, Terry decides to help them make a new portal. Froggy Little Christmas. As Anne and her family get ready for Christmas, the planters are confused by it. Anne's mom has a dream of entering a float in the parade, but turns it down due to the cost. However, Anne, the planters, and the tech influencers previously befriended by Polly, the IT gals, make one for her. Andreas, however, finds Anne and takes over a Santa Claus float via a specialized drone, but he's thwarted as usual. Darcy, the merged form of Marcy and the core, mocks Andreas for his failures, and Rebecca Sugar sings a sweet little holiday song. Escape to Amphibia. With the help of Terry and Dr. Jan, the new portal is up and running, but it doesn't have the power to stay open. Meanwhile, the Boonchoys are out getting supplies for Anne's trip, but the FBI and Mr. X show up. They capture the planters, but Anne and the Boonchoys recruit their friends and allies made since returning to rescue them. However, the rescue party gets arrested as well, but Anne manages to finish the operation and save the planters before doing the thing that the episode title says. Oh, and also it turns out that everything in Amphibia is crappy now. Mother of Olms. After returning, the gang quickly joins the Resistance. They begin to apply the new information they learned while on Earth. They go meet Mother Olm, but she's unable to remember what she's meant to say. They're sent to put some cream on Mother Olm's brain that'll help her remember. They fail, but thankfully she wrote down the prophecy that states that the 3 stars will burn bright. If only she'd tried to remember that she wrote it down first! The beginning of the end. The rebels break into Andreas' castle to steal the music box back, but they fail and are captured by Darcy. Darcy plans to kill Anne, but Anne leverages her knowledge as a way to save herself and her friends. Andreas and Darcy then begin their plan to invade Earth by opening a portal to Los Angeles. All in. As the invasion continues, Anne and the planters are reunited with Mr. X and the Boonchoys, who have become expertly trained by the FBI in preparation for this inevitability. The rebels split into teams. And the FBI, the planters, and the Boonchoys on the Earth side attack the army, while Sasha, Grime, Yunin, and Olivia on the Amphibia side assault the castle. The planters are faced with the herons that killed their family, but they manage to tame them and use them to fight the army. Sasha and Grime face off against Darcy, with Grime getting his arm cut off. Anne faces off against Andreas, however Sprig shows up and produces a letter he found in the rebel hideout, addressed to Andreas. Turns out the letter is from Leaf, stating that Leaf still cared about him despite all that happened. Andreas loses the will to fight and is defeated by Anne. It's then revealed that Andreas is covered in cybernetics, which explain why he had been able to live for over 1,000 years. Darcy prepares to kill Grime, but Sasha defeats her by severing Marcy's connection to the core, freeing Marcy. When this is done, the heroes claim victory and return the castle to Amphibia. The hardest thing. As it turns out, the core still survives, having escaped Marcy just in time to avoid being destroyed. It fled back to Amphibia, where it merged with the moon. The heroes then notice as they celebrate that the moon is growing closer. Valeriana imbues Anne, Marcy, and Sasha with the power of the gems to stop the moon's fall and save the planet. Before taking off, Mother Olm lets Anne know the final part of the prophecy, which may cost Anne the ultimate price, but Anne is determined to end this. Andreas, having a change of heart, breaks his link with the core and sends his robots to help Anne, Marcy, and Sasha. Despite the efforts though, Sasha and Marcy can't hold their power. Anne, who's more used to her powers, asks for their gems and sends them back to the surface. She then uses all of the powers at once to power up to Ultra Instinct, basically, and fires a beam so powerful that it obliterates the moon and the core entirely. Anne then returns to the surface, but ultimately dies from the power, her body crumbling away. Anne wakes up face to face with the Guardian, who says that she's the first human in 10,000 years to use the power of the gems selflessly. The Guardian then asks Anne if she'd be interested in being the next Guardian, as the current one is tired and looking to retire, but Anne declines, much to the disappointment of the Guardian. They make an agreement that Anne will live out the rest of her life so that she may be wiser for when the time comes for her to take up the mantle. Anne is returned to the world of the living, to everyone's jubilation and confusion after seeing her body dissolve before their eyes. After saying goodbye to everyone one final time, Marcy, Anne, and Sasha return home to Earth. 2020 AD. Polly has grown into a full-fledged frog, Wardwood and Amphibia as a whole is being rebuilt, Andreas is still alive but a prisoner, but he's allowed to tend to the gardens. Hop Pop now runs a California avocado farm, having developed a slight obsession with avocados when in LA. A new continent in Amphibia is discovered, and Sprig and Ivy, raring to go for more adventures, go to explore it. 2024 AD. Anne, Sasha, and Marcy graduate from high school, and while their childhood bond remains, they all inevitably drift apart. 2029 AD. Anne is now a herpetologist who studies frogs, having named one of her frogs after Sprig. Sasha has become a child psychologist, though she still has some anger management issues, and Marcy is living out of state and is a promising webcomic designer. They get back together to celebrate Anne's 23rd birthday. 2098 AD. Anne Boonshoy dies in her early 90s and presumably becomes the successor to the multiversal guardian. And that's just about everything. Yes, it's extremely sad that it's over, but I'm so glad we got an actual ending instead of a sudden cancellation, and it's undoubtedly cemented itself as a modern classic. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give us a like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified about when we drop more videos like this one, and always remember, my friends, Frederator loves you.